Hello, viewers. Good afternoon. Welcome to this episode of the Youth Roundtable. Well, last week, His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, who is the President of the Republic of Kenya, while addressing manufacturers in Nairobi, said that, Uganda should produce more milk, but I believe that milk represents the vast majority of Uganda's potential of producing many items, milk, coffee, tea, among other things. But this milk should be produced and sold to Kenya, whereas Kenya explores broader markets. I believe this is the purpose of the East African Federation, that we can have a common market where we can exchange goods and commodities, but also where there can be free movement of persons. We know that the bigger picture could be political federation, but we know that the economic integration is a very important part of the puzzle. Well, this week, the Youth Roundtable convenes to explore the East African Federation and the nitty-gritties and the setbacks we have made over time, but also the gains we have registered over time. Colleagues, I'm joined by a panel of distinguished gentlemen so far. We expect a lady to join us along the way. That is now my humble honor to introduce to you. From the Uganda National Students Association, the Secretary for International Affairs, but also the Deputy Secretary General of the East African Students Union. Well, we are discussing East Africa, so who better placed from the students community to share their opinions with us? Mr. Felix Odu, many thanks for joining us, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good afternoon, viewers and listeners of Civic Space TV. Just as he has mentioned, I'm called Odu Felix, the political vibrator. Stated it well, I'm a Secretary for International Affairs in the Uganda National Students Association, known as UNSA. At the same time, the Deputy Secretary General in the East African Students Union. Thank you.
Wow, many thanks. That is a plethora of vibration right there. Yes, Mr. Julius J.A.Bwesigye, who is a legal officer at Advocates Research Facility. Julius, many thanks for spending time to be on the show.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Like you've mentioned, my name is J.A.Bwesigye. I am a researcher, a lawyer, and I'm a student too. I'm at the School of Law doing a master's degree. It's a particular honor for me to be here this morning.
Wow, amazing, amazing. Yes, then the last but not least, like I mentioned, we shall expect a lady along the way, is Mutungisa Edgar, who is a petroleum engineering and environmental management student at Mast University in Ibarra. Edgar, many thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, moderator. I am Edgar Mutungisa. I'm a student who is finalizing now, almost done, in petroleum engineering and environmental management, but I'm also the East African Community Youth Ambassador to Uganda.
Oh.
I'm very glad to be here.
Wow, wow, amazing. Well, thank you. It's a group of East Africans, I must say. Julius, let me just begin with you, and with no particular order here. We are discussing the economic integration of East Africa. What strides have we made so far? What is the background to where we find ourselves today? Because I know that the East African Federation is not a new conversation. It has in fact been there. It goes back to the colonial days. It goes back to post-colonial times, in the times of Mwalimu Julius Nyerere and Mzee Obote, and it has been work in progress, right? So just for the benefit of our viewers who perhaps understands or views the East African Federation as a today thing, can you just give it some historical perspective and bring it to where we are today?
Maybe to make, because for me I enjoy putting things in the simplest way.
Yeah.
Not all our viewers are these high-profile elites who who can perceive these things. But if you would narrow it down, integration is the process where different countries come together with the prime objective of, one, strengthening their bargaining powers, but also widening their market base. So we have several different units, we have different blocks. When we talk about ECOWAS, when we talk about the European Union globally, I think the European Union is the most distinguished bloc that we have in the global system. But the East African community has equally been into place. Right from the days of the Mwalimu Julius Nyerere's and the Upper Milton Obote regimes, it has been having ups and downs. So the political upheavals in the 1972 where the late president of Uganda, Idi Amin, invaded Tanzania. Now, disorganized, it's through the achievements that had already been accomplished by our founding fathers into complete disarray, and so then it disappeared for a short while. So then it's been revived. Is it in 1995? With the different phases. What's very important to understand is that it's a process. First is a treaty, an agreement that countries enter into, that Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, that they have agreed to work together. So they sit and put this into a writing. And then after this, then we have other protocols that come into effect. And where we are currently, we are moving towards the second last phase of the integration. Political integration is the last phase of all the stages. So we have the economic union that is now being shaped. We have already a committee that has been established to fast track this. We have an East African Monetary Union Institute that is being fast tracked, but definitely without shortcomings in issue. We cannot forget that there are very many difficulties surrounding this, and perhaps we shall delve into this as the discussion goes on.
All right. Thank you. Felix, let me just come to you. When African states were clamoring for their independence, Kwame Nkrumah convened African leaders who later became post-independence leaders, the likes of Hastings Kamuzu Banda, Jomo Kenyatta, who later became independence leaders in their country. And he said something that, seek first the political kingdom, then everything else shall fall in place. Is it true? Because Julius asserts that the political federation is the last part of this integration. But I think, in fact, we are focused more on the politics than the economy itself. Is it true? And that is why, for example, the students of East Africa went ahead to form a political union. So is it true that you're focusing more on the political integration and forgetting the economics that Dr. William Ruto is emphasizing, that you produce more milk, you produce more tea, we shall buy. But the Odus are saying, no, let us first form a political union, then we shall discuss the economics. So which is which? What are you prioritizing as students of East Africa?
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. Once again, I'm happy to join viewers of Civic Space TV. Maybe just to add some flesh to my introduction, I'm a trained medical doctor, and at the same time, a co-founder of YASU, which we have just mentioned, the East Africa Students Union. Before I tackle your question, permit me, viewers, Civic Space TV is globally, before time catches us. Today, UNSA, Uganda National Students Association, is launching the Keep a Girl Child in School campaign, a project where we are looking at fundraising and distributing reusable sanitary pads to over 2 million girls who are disadvantaged. We are saying, if condoms are being distributed for free, what of the sanitary pads? Away from that, I want to agree that for us to achieve economic integration as ESC, the question of a political will, we can't run away from it. I just want to track the issue of cooperation started to date back in 1917. That's when Uganda and Kenya started thinking of a cooperation. After Uganda discussed that, it took about 10 years. The United Republic of Tanzania, which includes Zanzibar, then came on board. That time they were Tanganyika. That was the colonial time. We moved on so well until the founding fathers of Africa. You just mentioned of Kwame Nkrumah, very important in the history of Africa in Ghana, where we had the Dr. Apollo Milton Obotes come in. We had the Jomo Kenyattas of Kenya come in. That's where we had the Julius Nyerere's come in. they were the first vision bearers. My co-panelist told us it was founded. Yes, in 1967. That's when a pseudo ESC was founded. But with the primary countries, Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. The aim was to see how we cooperate in lines of trade. Can we push the discussion beyond trade to issues of security, which are important for regional development? As I go ahead, our vision as the YASU, the East African Students Union, which encompasses Uganda under UNSA, it encompasses Kenya under PUSO, encompasses Rwanda under its national organization, Burundi, DRC, and South Sudan. We are saying we would like to be a worldwide prosperous student organization that is self-reliant, but most importantly, tackle the question of regional development. At that point in time, we are dealing with economics. We can't speak about economics and leave the question of the GDP. It's the measure, the real measure of economic growth. When we were getting independence, if I track back, the GDP of Uganda itself was about 9 billion US dollars. My brother talked of when we had instability, the dictatorial regime, it dropped to about 1.5 billion US dollars. But after the ESC talk was revived, actually it was in 1999, when again we are privileged that our current president of Uganda was part of the people who signed the treaty which established the ESC, General J.A.Bwesigye. Then we had others join in, people like Daniel Arap Moi, who we can't remove him from this discussion. The president of Tanzania by then, Ali Hassan Mwinyi, we can't remove them by that time. But if you look at the GDP of Kenya, it was also in about 1 billion US dollars. But after reviving the ESC, right now in 2022, we are talking of the GDP of Uganda being about 30 billion US dollars. Kenya is way ahead of us in about 7 billion US dollars. That's what brings in the important debate by the current president of Kenya, William Ruto, and Sameh, His Excellency. If I'm to give some data to this, Uganda exports about 300 million liters. And we are situated to be the Africa's leading exporter of milk. It is an interesting conversation that His Excellency Ruto in Kenya is saying, for us as Kenyans, we can concentrate on value addition and make the milk powder. We can send it to West Africa, to European Union. Uganda is the production, the engine. We have the cows. There are cows in Ankole. We still have some cows also in Acholi and part of Teso. So if we can harness all this, Kenya is very ready to offer us an open market.
Good.
I would like to stop there.
Good.
Thank you.
Amazing. Edgar, let me just come to you. First of all, as a student of petroleum engineering and environmental management, I want to know your stand on ECOP, first of all. Just before I ask you my question, what is your stand on ECOP?
ECOP should proceed, definitely.
It should proceed?
Yes. And the measures are really well mitigated and everything is in place as opposed to...
Yeah, let's first explore that, because we are discussing economic integration. We are discussing how can East Africa build its economic muscle. And oil, there is a very interesting economist from Bank of Uganda, the central bank, who said that Uganda's debt burden, where it has reached now, it can only be addressed through 3 ways. One is either we are forgiven, like they just waive off the debt and say, now for you failed to pay, we have forgiven you. Or our oil gets out of the ground. Then we can make money and repay that debt. 3, we just, there is a word, when you just refuse to pay, just refuse
Debt repudiation.
Debt repudiation. So, and the issue of oil becomes very important when we are discussing the East African economic integration. So do you think that those who are saying, let's stop ECOP are having a misguided conversation, and they are not putting the East African Federation, and they are not being visionary enough to see that the oil is going to be a groundbreaking initiative that will empower East Africa. Let's just begin from ECOP before I take you further.
Yeah, I think the people who are saying stop ECOP, it's really out of deep ignorance. We must appreciate that, and I will speak that authoritatively, because even the EU resolution itself, and I had an opportunity to discuss with the person who moved that resolution. We had a call together, and he had switched off the phone. He was Honorable Malte in the EU, because all the grounds I discussed were just typically and deeply myopic. Because there are issues raised of human rights concerns, issues of raised, and all those issues of conversation. And yet all those issues were already discussed in our environmental and social impact assessment plans. What we are waiting for was an objective discussion on why you think those plans cannot work, or why you think maybe these mitigation measures are just not possible. That would have been a good debate. But the debate that just comes raising concerns of human rights, etc., is just a debate simply for activists. And you know how activists operate. There are many young people making the noise because they want tickets to go and attend COP27 in Egypt. So there are just many selfish factors around it. But if you analyze that ECO project and the process that it followed is quality. Because for starters, the environmental concerns and the environmental background checks and etc. were made by international bodies. Up to date, there's no any international body that has questioned the mitigation measures that were laid within those environmental social impact assessment plans. Beyond that, they gathered a team of independent investigators who carried out public hearings. Over 10,000 people were reached physically in all those areas of Lisa where entire ECOP will be passing. And in fact, those mitigation plans and measures in their plan, 50% was contributed from those public gatherings. That means the society, it's the local people wananchi that informed those measures, both for environmental and social, that impact assessment plan. So now at a point when someone tells you that this is a process that excluded people, that is just of a few people, or that economically, and then they do these things of climate change and environmental. Now, for issues of climate change and environment, it's also again that one that is just myopic. Because if you consider, for instance, from 2005, 2015, our carbon emissions grew at a rate of 37 million tons. At that time, there was no any carbon emissions from our ECOP. And it's in that process, we see that rise. So it's not epistemically true that it is this ECOP project necessarily that has been, responsible for all that. So there are many other ways, even of lifestyle, that say so much of this ECOP. And what these people are mentioning as regards to climate is just deeply exaggerated. Yeah, we think the climate change is real, and we think those measures that are those environmental concerns should be put in place. But I think the plan is there. So this EU and people making noise should make reference to that plan. I'm open to a discussion that interrogates those measures. That's an honest discussion. Yeah. So we can see whether we have the feasibility, whether we have the potential, whether we have all that. But this war point and all that spirit that was roaming around Stop ECOP was just a spirit of blind activism.
Yeah, well, because that is very important. Because this pipeline will begin from Uganda and end up in Tanga, where there will be a refinery. So the opportunities that it will offer to the East Africans is actually quite enormous in terms of job opportunities, in terms of enterprise. There are so many opportunities. So I think you make a very valid argument to say that ECOP must proceed because of the benefits that come with it. And fair enough. Julius, let me just come to you. President William Ruto said that Uganda should produce the milk, and Mr. Odur, emphasized that. Produce the milk, Kenya has the factories to have value addition added. I know Ruto enjoys a lot of popularity in Uganda. He's quite famous in Uganda. I know.
Just as
Ugandans, he is a very popular president. But is his statement an indictment on Uganda that we actually don't have capacity to have value addition on our products? Is it? Are there undertones of indictment on our value addition process?
Yeah, thank you so much, my brother. and to you, the viewers, what's important to note here is that one, we have to make a key observation that Kenya in East Africa is a very lucky country to have William Ruto as their leader. His policies, especially his economic policies, are largely to the benefit of their economy. If you look at the manner in which he's turning around these fuel subsidies, because his predecessor, the former president, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, had entered into an arrangement with the International Monetary Fund. So a loan was issued to Kenya, and that loan was only being channeled to the subsidies into the oil sector. So when he came on board, he said, you know, guys, this is not going to work. What's the interest rate of this loan? So for him to observe, because you see, the way you have stated it, it doesn't bring out the actual indictment that we have as a country. He says, Kenyans, fellow Kenyans, so we can utilize our own milk here, improve it, export it to Central Africa, export it to other countries. This is high value milk. And then for purposes of drinking, just from the cow, we go to Uganda, buy and drink. Meaning that ours is going to Kenya in its primary form at a lower price. Okay? Meaning that they can even still proceed and buy our primary milk, process it, add value unto it, and export it, and get the benefit, the economic benefit that comes out of this secondary and tertiary production and processing. And key, because I am guided to believe that this whole discussion is within the framework of the East African community. For the East African community to succeed, there has to be economic balance. That countries, member states, must strengthen their capacities in terms of production, that is industrialization. Agricultural products must be processed, must not be sold in their primary stage as they are. You should not be harvesting your coffee. You colleagues that are always talking about our national coffee. But it's quite ridiculous that you harvest coffee and export this coffee to Tanzania in its raw form. It's quite ridiculous that Uganda can harvest its milk and export it to Tanzania, to Kenya in its raw form. Because what does this imply? It implies that our farmers here will remain poor. Yes, he has observed, the political vibrator, the doctor, has observed that we have our cows. But go down and see the economic indicators of these people are rearing cows. Economic indicators in terms of access to medical care, you're a doctor, in terms of provision of food, in terms of several aspects, education, they are poor, literally, despite having the cows. And this all goes down to the issue of selling. So, by way of conclusion, his assertion indeed is a rude indictment against us as a country, that yes, we don't know what to do with our resources, and we need to get back on the drawing table. We need to get our leaders and have them engaged in developing policies, economic policies, that will indeed see our economy boosted. We need to see that we find a way of substituting debt financing and have our domestic resources able to make a reasonable contribution of our national economy. And I think that way we shall have an equal bargaining position in the East African community framework. I assure.
Yes, Edgar, I see you want to say something.
I know, I just think what you're saying is actually true. Just that, I think Ruto's statement was not just about economics and just transferring and just the idea of value addition. It was also a diplomatic response, in my opinion, because it comes at a time when, you know, there's this thing of, you know, our general was here, and then, you know, Kenyans and all that. And now there was this sort of, furiatives rising in Kenyans, saying, but this general, what's wrong? I'm sorry for that Twitter conversation. But I think what the response of Ruto was also to show Kenyans that they think this is just pity. There's so much we need from Uganda. There's so much you can benefit. There's so much beyond these statements of what people are just saying. And I think that was the spirit in which it was saying that statement, showing these Kenyans that you can actually, instead of focusing on what General Moses is saying, focus on having a market here, have their milk, have it here, raise your value, you grow. Yeah. We need them. And it was something that was the spirit of the conversation. Yeah. Not so much of the value.
Yeah, sure. It is open. I mean, feel free.
Yeah, that is okay. I want to agree with my fellow colleagues today. I followed that statement closely of William Ruto. I am his admirer. We the youth, we are hustlers. There is nobody who has reached there. Our motto of UNSA says we struggle for liberation. Every day, if you are a thousandaire, that's my word, you aim to be a millionaire. If you're a millionaire, you aim to be a trillionaire. So he was saying, why should we fight Ugandans, our brothers? Why should we argue? Why should we fight? Instead, let's provide them an opportunity. For me, I looked at that as really a political will. I think at the time, East Africa is blessed at the time. Let me look at the president of Uganda, who is the eldest, and he was there during the signing of this East African treaty. Then we have President William Ruto, who is the youngest. For me, I would want to assert it to, a bicycle on a hill, carrying, a youthful person is carrying an old man with another child on the bicycle. They reach a hill, they are failing to make it to the top and then have the slope. At this point in time, I see that President William Ruto is bringing back energy to the people who were vision bearers, because he will live longer than these people. That is God willing. If we look at the life expectancy of Uganda now, it is about 58 years. For me, I feel it is really still a very good thing.
Well, yes, Julius.
I just wanted to depart with him, rather from him, softly. You see, he says East African community is blessed. It is my contention that East African community has no blessing, and you cannot defend the same. You see, an East African community that is premised on diverging political ideologies, diverging economic ideologies, cannot be a blessed community. If you look at the example of the European Union that I had talked about at the start of this conversation, this is a union of members that have, one, a homogeneous political ideology, two, a homogeneous economic ideology, three, a homogeneous social ideology. So when you come here in East Africa, we have Rwanda, because you don't agree with because the issues between Uganda and Rwanda, this is what I have always observed, are non-issues. They are issues that have totally nothing to do with Ugandans. These are personal issues, like me, Julius and Kidega. We have known each other. Perhaps we have met on a forum and we don't agree on this, and we go back because you have a kingdom somewhere and I have a kingdom somewhere else. Then I said my kingdom should not interact with you. This is a social...
Yes, allow him to make his point. Yeah, that's clear.
A social disharmony that we cannot allude to say that we have a blessing. When you look at the term limits, you see, my brother, the political vibrator, stated categorically that our president was there at the time when they were signing the East African Treaty. And this is 1995. How many presidents have we had in Kenya? And the blessings that come. Right now you're saying you cherish the vigor and the charisma that Ruto brings into the political equation in the East African community. Would you imagine that there would be someone with such a charisma before he came onto the political periphery? Meaning that to discover talent in the East African community, we must accept and grant merit where it is supposed to be accorded the first opportunity. That we must open the playfield to have various actors And by the way, even if you are very nice, you dance and reach at a point and say, okay, let me go aside so that the country can search from the political vibrators who will come and motivate others, you know, and this is where we would say we have a blessing. So having those differences in the infrastructural projects, you have an entire Democratic Republic of Congo that is not connected. Some places in Congo are virgin lands. No one has been there. You go there, you're discovering new plants, new forests, new animals, and you cannot see the evidence of life there. The road network is poor. We have been seeing in the Shujaa operation where Uganda was tasked to proceed and construct and open up roads before they can effectively implement their military operation. Such a country belonging to a bloc like the one we have here, you cannot allude to the fact that we have a blessing. So to have a community that is blessed, we must be premised, we must be anchored on a homogeneous political system. We must be anchored on closely related social cohesion factors. We must be having a reasonable level of economic development. A Burundi that is fragile as it is, that cannot have supply of fuel in a consistent period of 3 months, that they have to have a month where fuel is out of reach in the whole country. You cannot say that that country, because it's part of the East African community, which opportunities do they bring on board? Do they bring skills? Do they bring talent? Do they bring resources? What do they bring? There is nothing. So
maybe markets. Yes.
But first of all, I think
sure you will of course respond. Of course.
Yeah, I
just
disagree
after
with this gentleman entirely. Everything on principle, on facts, and everything. First of all, on principle, before we go to facts, on principle, it's a matter of priority. So political federation and that harmonization of political policy and stuff that he's talking about, and how you should all have term limits, is not that much important to integration, because it's a factor of bottom up or up bottom. Because as we mentioned, political federation is good as the ultimate goal, but now what he expects is that you should first of all have unison at the top politically, and then you can term in social fabrics, you can term in economics, you can term in all that. Reality is, if that was to be possible, we know it would take almost a century, because it will be narrowed down just individuals. A certain seven saying, no, I don't want, the other one saying, and we'll never have any progress. What EAC chose was the bottom up. That before we go into the issues of egos of individuals at the top, can we first have integration at the bottom? Can we have a customs union? Can we have these tax barriers eradicated? I was in Kenya to observe the elections for 2 weeks without an ID, without a passport.
Okay.
I traveled. If I had any market, if I had people to make, I would make it that way. I would make that progress. Something which you would not do 10 years ago. So you cannot say that is not a blessing. Secondly, on principle, I don't think a blessing means that you must be perfect. What he's describing, that we have Congo here, we have issues in Burundi, is just a factor that, we are not perfect. Which I don't think, but I think we are blessed in terms of resources. Even when the fastest growing regional bloc, not even the EU was growing at this rate which we are growing. But second, this is the EU that you mentioned. I don't want to go there because that will be another discussion. But the EU has even more disastrous issues. We can't go there as compared to ours. So we don't think that's the perfect sort of emblem we can look at. But why do we say we are still a blessing in the East African community? We had our motto very simple, not the motto, but the strategy. The aim was to widen and deepen integration. As regards to widening, you see we have Congo, you see we have all those issues. You see even Somalia now and Ethiopia, they're already in a process of applying so that they can join the community. Widening, we are there. On deepening integration, now deepening, apart from the widening, the common market is already now in place. You can travel without visas, without all that, just with the national ID. You see the harmonization in sort of passport system. Now you see also the harmonization in sort of the tax rates, as for those tariff barriers for the people, for the traders. What the problem is not just on the policy. I think on the policy, I don't know, we could discuss maybe for the entire evening. But what the problem is here is that it's not yet fully people-driven and people-centered, the integration part of it. That all these things, as good as they are on paper, very few people know. The farmer right now, where maybe in Soroti, or maybe a farmer somewhere in Ankole, does not fully understand what would you need to take the coffee to Kenya. Even some of them don't even know the possibility of these visas happening and all this visa-free economy. So it's not yet fully people-centered and and people-driven, but as sort of being a blessing in terms of resources and everything. Hey, come on. I think that is not even debatable. It's as plain as
it is trite knowledge.
It's judicially noted.
Yes, Felix. Julius really just dismissed your argument that we are blessed. How do you respond to that?
I want to start in a unique way by saying watu wetu ambayo nyinyi naona Civic Space TV leo tuko naona mambo ya East African community. In YASU, our motto is leadership in diversity, which translates to uongozi katika utofauti. We embrace the spirit of diversity in leadership. We realize that all these political leaders of this country are unique in their own way. Maybe let me land. My brother might have misunderstood me. What I meant by that analogy of the bicycle having 3 people on a hill, having a youthful person riding it, then we have a grandfather seated at the carrier and is being carried with another youthful person. When they reach the hill, definitely the youthful person will get tired. We have the presidents like His Excellency Kagame, they are still also youthful. This grandfather will remain on the carrier, and this young man will come out and push this bike, and we shall reach the slope and move. And we are heading towards that. We've achieved the customs union, which is almost the primary step into achieving the integration. We have fairly achieved the common market, which is also another primary stage. Right now, where we are at is the stage of a monetary union. Actually, for me, I'm looking forward in maybe 20 years, we having our own currency as East Africa, the medium of exchange, may be called Pesa. Pesa should be weighing heavily against the dollar. So that's my thinking. Hopefully our medium of exchange will be called Pesa. That's why I still insist that by having the old leadership, by having the young leadership. Recently, Mzee, we call him, so the president of Uganda, is believing in the parish development model, which has taken the issue of economic growth, wealth creation, to the lower units. I believe in order for us to achieve economic integration, we must take this issue of wealth to the family unit, which is at the village level. But what do we need at that level? Let people produce in those villages. Maybe for me, what I would advocate is reactivation and revamping of these cooperatives. It is through these cooperatives that somebody in Anyomotuon, in Gulu, in Kisoro there, can produce their Irish, sell it to the cooperative, which has a bigger bargaining power, which can open up to the market which is there in East Africa. We already have COMESA, which is another bigger opportunity of trade, which is the common market, I think, for Eastern and Southern Africa. So in that way, we are bringing the picture of the common man. Yes, we are discussing this economic integration in boardrooms, in ESCs, but have we involved the common man? Here is the parish development model, which for me, I would encourage the youth. We should harness these opportunities. I believe that later on we shall dive much into the opportunities that brings. I really beg to submit and still emphasize that it is a blessing in disguise.
Thank you. Julius, let me just come to you.
Sure.
The East African community has, for example, Tanzania. Tanzania also belongs to SADC, right? If I'm right. So are there conflicting loyalties in the membership of these countries that because you belong to SADC and also you belong to the EAC, then there you are conflicting? Where do I go? So do you think that we should have at now a legal perspective, we should have legal regulations to say that if you're part of a given economic bloc, you cannot be part of another economic bloc. Or we should liberalize it and make it open that you can be part of as many blocks as you want. So how do you go about with this?
Thank you so much.
But also, of course, as you
thank you so much. But look at it. The cardinal objective of an integration process is achieving the attainment of political federation. And what is the essence of this? That we have several countries. You see, we have beauty in numbers. If you see the first three most powerful nations on earth, these are at the same time the most densely populated nations. We have China, we have the United States of America, we have India. These are the most densely populated nations. What does it imply? It implies that the more the numbers, these numbers come with power. They come with talent. They come with skill. They come with innovation and creativity. These are tenets that boost the economy. So why economic integration may not be successful without attaining political federation, as he says, because to him, he says, no, it is not necessary to have political integration. If I did pick
No, it's
correctly.
necessary, but it's the last step. It's not important as an initial step.
Indeed, I agree. I have the understanding of that. But what I'm asserting is that if you start a journey and go halfway, you won't achieve the cardinal objective. Our aim as the East African community is to have an entire system represented by William Ruto or Yoweri Kaguta Museveni or the vibrator. If at all our system permitted the vibrator to run for a topmost office and later on attain it and occupy it. To have him represent us, to negotiate with the International Monetary Fund, to negotiate with the World Bank for a loan that favors all the countries in East Africa. It cannot be attained unless we attain a political federation.
That's not true.
It is my contention. Can you, within the framework, would you, of course I wouldn't ask you the legal framework, but tell me, how would the East African community negotiate for a loan right now that affects Burundi, that affects South Sudan, that affects all these nitty-gritty countries that have
actually, there is a structure on that. It was actually getting extended to those double taxation agreements where, here's the challenge, where the EU is supposed to challenge, the EAC bloc to negotiate with the EU bloc. However, there was a challenge where it was later discovered that EU bypassed the EAC bloc and was able to negotiate with Tanzania as a country and raise issues. So it's possible.
Moderator, information on the same topic, if I'm permitted. My brothers are looking at a political federation. For me, I'm trying to say that there is work in progress. There are systems which have already been established by the treaty we are all referring to, the East African Community Treaty, which was signed, yes, in 1999, whereby we have a functional summit. It's the topmost decision-making body. Maybe I can refer it to an executive in a country where presidents meet. We are all aware of this. We have a council of ministers. All these East African states have ministers of East Africa. Still the same treaty establishes IALA, which is a legislative arm, which has every member country has representatives to the same body. When we come to the judiciary, we have the East African Court of Justice. So there is already a picture of a government being formed. The only disagreement right now is probably who will be the president and would the other presidents of East Africa be vice presidents. Yes, right now, maybe let me talk about our structure briefly. We believe they could borrow a leaf. We have one president of IASU, East African Students Union, who is the president of KUSO, Kenya University Students Organization. Then these member states have vice presidents, like we have vice president of Uganda, who is His Excellency Roy Rugumayo. in order for you to be in IASU, you must first be part of your national students association, like in Uganda, the way we have UNSA. These countries all have vice presidents. The one of Tanzania is Dr. Sabra Hussein. She just graduated of recent from the medical school. Let me still throw more light. I'm familiar with the medical discipline. Currently, we have the East African Medical and Dental Practitioners Council. This is a council that regulates medical practice across the Eastern Bloc, of which the Uganda Medical and Dental Practitioners Council subscribes to, and of which I think you're a member of the National Youth Council. I'm not very familiar, but we should be all having such things. So if the students are achieving and we are working unanimously with our motto of leadership in diversity, we believe we have achieved almost 50%. The issue of who will be the president is the contentious issue. Should it be Museveni of Uganda? Should it be Felix Tshisekedi of DRC? Should it be the chairperson of the summit currently, Ndai Nshimwe Everest of Burundi? Or should it be Ruto the hustler? That's where there is contention. Thank you.
Perhaps
I was still responding to the question of whether dual membership has an effect on the ultimate structure of the East African community. And the point that I was delivering home before they interjected was that if there is dual ownership, indeed that points to the fact that it will, within the framework of regional blocs, the way they function, it will not be possible to attain political framework. At a point when they interjected, I was trying to reiterate the centrality of the political federation, stating that this is actually the final thing that makes the bloc realize all the fruits that the integration aims to achieve. If we are to achieve the political federation, the question will be, can we have a political federation with one president, where we have a Tanzania that is under the other bloc and also partially this side? So it would be good practice that all the countries allege their loyalty to one bloc.
I have one question on that.
With one voice.
There's one question to understand him clearly before I may engage later. What exactly is so special about the political federation? What are those advantages that you would get with political federation that you can't get when you have the customs union, the common market, and the monetary union?
I want you, in responding to this question, to look at a government. So we have the judiciary, yes we do. We have the legislature, the three arms of government.
Yes.
That's what you, the lawyers, call division of power.
Yes. And you also have an executive.
And we have the executive.
Yeah,
Yes.
just without a president, but you have the ministers.
Okay?
Yeah.
So now you have the ministers and you understand what that means.
You point out for me one benefit that you so much think can only come from political negotiation can't have
In
now.
your previous submission, you stated that East African community went to bargain for a loan with the International Monetary Fund. And the International Monetary Fund moved down to Tanzania and bypassed the East African community. Right? That's one danger.
So
that
with
you
one
highlighted.
president, how will that be solved?
Permit me to make a point, because you see, when you ask several questions, we might not be able to objectively clarify these issues to the viewers. I know you understand this, but the viewers might really not be appreciating this. So where, if, for example, we had a president then, we had attained a political federation, International Monetary Fund would not negotiate with Tanzania, because Tanzania would be duty-bound to refer this matter to the head of state for the bloc. And this is how it, and short of that, there would be disastrous consequences for Tanzania. Economic sanctions, political sanctions, penalties, and no country would dare. Why do we have these intrigues? The starting point was between Uganda and Kenya. So you have a Uganda that wants to take the oil pipeline deal, it misses. That distorted our relationship with the whole government. I don't know if you understand that. And so it's taken to Tanganyika, rather to Tanzania. So we have issues. They no longer want to buy our maize simply because we have denied them the oil pipeline deal. The issue of milk descends from the same line of argument. So these questions that offer that concern the economic management of East Africa can only be answered by one question: the attainment of a political federation. Without this, we shall have ad hoc arrangements, we shall have a parliament, we shall have a legislature, but in the end, it shall still collapse. It's my submission, really.
Yeah.
It's my
just 1 second, Edgar. He's emphasizing political federation. Of recent, our president, President J.A.Bwesigye Museveni, has attained the title of father of the region. You know, and this title has been given to him or bestowed upon him by another sovereign president. Right? Yeah. So does it mean that as we discuss integration, perhaps the figure that we are not mentioning here, but who is the potential leader of the region, is actually our president? Do you subscribe to the same school of thought that even when we first struck political integration, as he wants it, the potential figure who could emerge as the leader is our president? Do you think that is a fact?
I think,
of course, as you respond to your other concerns. Yeah.
Okay, that one, as well, I may not be able to say.
He doesn't
for some reason.
respond to political questions.
Yes. But I think here, who is most likely leader of this region indeed is someone who has maybe a good track record in contributing to it. And that record could not be possible if he just had started as he thought would start politically. That we just come up in a meetings already discussing how do we make elections. I think it's important for these steps to first emerge. We see how have you managed the customs union, how are people responding, to monetary, to the common market and etc. Those structures are very important. Number two, I don't respond to actually these allegations of saying that the aflatoxins in our maize and those claims were because we do not pass the pipeline that side. And that was a very other world different issue. I don't think I will engage that one. But the whole idea here is that political federation, as much as we do love it and desire it, it is not in any way a hindrance to what should happen. Because what matters, even in instance of integration, is not who is the president of us all. What matters is what is happening for our people. If you can be able to have your maize, go to Kenya. If you can be able to travel without all this money through visas and etc., is what integration is about. The political question on top is not that important. But secondly, maybe there's a structure which you miss. And I think he was trying to mention on how the structures are at EAC. And that's what I was asking you. We have the heads, we have the summit, we have the Council of Ministers, we have the EL and all those bodies. But most importantly, like in this regard of business, we have an East African Community Business Council that can make all those bodies and know how do we engage strategically with these different blocks and these different blocks. You don't need a president somewhere on top for work to be done. But secondly, the issue of integration, as you mentioned, it will be, it's not an issue that just depends on these sort of laws, that you will do this, you will negotiate with this country, if not, we shall give you sanctions. That's not how it operates. Still, individual presidents would have the authority from their people. You don't want a scenario, either or even in his world, well painted, where you say that this will not happen or you're going to sanction this president. Otherwise, you still cause those barriers. Yeah. So I think on that issue, submitting, and also in relation to the question you had asked me previously, economic integration is important, but also this issue of political federation is indeed an idea which we should think of last as how the East African community thought it fit, even the heads of, even the summit itself, and let it be the last step. It's important that the people and young people harness the opportunities that are existing within the existing structures now. They are there and they are many.
Moderator, maybe.
Just 1 second. I want us to take a short commercial break. So just as you respond to his concerns, just in 1 minute, so you can take a short commercial break. Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. I want us to look at this, that we already have what I would call a pseudo-political federation. Because the summit has the chair of the summit, who is the current sitting president of Burundi, Evariste Ndayishimiye, if I've got that name correctly. And this is presumably would be the president of EAC at the moment. But we just don't have legal frameworks that give them absolute authority. The issue of ego of this president is another issue. Then the issue of when we have a political federation, the sovereignty of these member states of EAC is a very important thing. I just needed to add that.
Add that. Well, and we shall begin with sovereignty, and of course, who better to expand on that than Council himself. So, well, guys, thank you. Let's just take a short commercial break. To the viewers, know that you are enjoying this conversation, but also importantly, we know that you have an opinion. There's a comment section just below this show. Give us your opinion, give us your thoughts. Let us know how best we can, bring the show to you, but also, most importantly, give us your thoughts on this topic. See you shortly after.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Yes, hello viewers. We'll be back from that short commercial break. Just like I promised you, we shall be joined by a fourth panelist, and I'm glad to announce to you that Diana Nabimanya has joined us on the show. Diana is a lawyer, but also she's pursuing LDC. I don't know what that is, but yes, she's a student at LDC. Diana, many thanks for joining us. Good afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
How do you feel being among four gentlemen?
I would have preferred a second lady, but I mean, it's okay to still represent.
It is what it is. All right. Thank you, Diana. I'll bring you in. Let me just allow you time to settle in. Julius, just before we took the short commercial break, Felix made an argument that I want you to respond to. That your argument regarding we should fast track political integration. He says that are member states willing to, for example, secede some of their sovereign powers? Because, political federation will come at a price. But are these member states willing to secede some of their sovereign powers to say, okay, now can President Museveni negotiate on our behalf for maybe an IMF loan that you're trying to mention earlier on? So do you think that the question of sovereignty could easily be addressed, factoring in mind that we still have egoistic issues between heads of state, like one of you emphasized earlier on? So how do we fast track political federation with a looming reality that are member states willing to relinquish some of their powers, but also the egoistic tendencies between the members of states? So how do we proceed with your very good argument?
Oh yeah, thank you so much. So what I did state is that for any integration, for any step to be realized, the first step is negotiation. That diplomatic round table where men and women representing their respective nations come to a bargain and make concessions has got to be undertaken first. And in this bargain, this is where the various heads of states come to a point of accepting, one, to part with part of their authority, okay? But two, take part of the benefits that result from the same, okay? So it's a function of bargain and accepting, and of course, when it is possible for them to engage in such diplomatic talks, they can. It has worked before. I mean, why then would we say that it cannot work this time round? But the key issue may be to respond to his concern. I didn't say that for the start, we should indeed be having the political federation first. This is the last phase of it all. But what I did submit is that there has to be enabling factors that permit the attainment of this final stage of integration. And these are, one, balanced infrastructures across all the regional states, that we cannot afford to have a Kenya that has a standard gauge railway connecting Mombasa to Kisumu to Nairobi, and then for us in Kampala, we only have that dilapidated railway network that connects Nakawa and also brings the people up to somewhere like Uganda House, and it stops from there and sleeps the whole day and waits in the evening to take the second route. That is a huge controversy. We must be having an empowered youth populace. What we have right now, 87% of the young people between the ages 18 to 35 have no meaningful economic venture. They are not employed. So to attain economic integration, as we are attempting to, and finally political integration, we must having such enabling factors. That's where I hinted on the political ideologies. That if there are term limits in Uganda, they should also be in Rwanda, in South Sudan, and in Congo. Because a leader of Congo might not be willing to work with a life president in Burundi. He might not be comfortable with that kind of arrangement. So we must, for now, before we even think of attaining political federation, work into our domestic issues and put them to order. Have industries. Have our milk not exported to Kenya for just drinking, but processed. So in processing these domestic products, we have industries. We have the young people now meaningfully engaged in production, and that's employment. We have to boost our political capital, because you see our economic capital to debate. What do you bring on the table? When, with due respect, Yoweri Museveni, with the many, many years he has been in office, is debating with William Ruto of yesterday but one. I'm telling you, when William Ruto speaks economically, the Musevenis will begin facing on the ground, because here it's not a matter of form, it's a matter of substance. Yes, you have been here for long, but who are the people that you represent?
Good question. I think, let me just bring it, Diana. Diana, you've just joined us, and
Yes.
picking from where Julius is speaking, the enthusiasm, the passion that we must fast track political integration. But let's just go back to the foundation of this conversation, that we must be able to establish an economic bloc, an economic integration. President William Ruto made a statement last week as he was addressing manufacturers in Nairobi, and said that Uganda should produce its milk and send it to Kenya, and the Kenyan milk should be added value to and exported to West Africa and other parts of the world. Then Uganda milk should come into Kenya for drinking. And this statement could be perceived in two ways. One, which is that Uganda is blessed with so much natural resources, milk being one of them, but also it could be an indictment that perhaps our manufacturing industry is not sufficient enough to create value to our product. So let me just bring you in right there. What do you make of first and foremost the economic future of East Africa? Are there any headways we have made as a bloc? But also, what setbacks do you recognize along the way as well? But also your overall opinion regarding that statement.
Yes. Thank you very much. Now, first and foremost, the economic integration of East Africa is very good on paper. It's a very good idea. We look at it and we see opportunities for younger people. We look at it and see free labor. We see free movement of labor. We see free movement of goods, free movement of services. It's a really good idea. However, like he said, there are things we have to harmonize first before we start moving on to other people. Because you see now Kenya is developed. And I think I heard one of the ministers say, in Kenya, the cost of production is a bit cheaper than the cost of production in Uganda. So by default, when things come from Kenya and come to Uganda, people are going to buy the things from Kenya before they ever consider to buy the ones from Uganda, because the cheaper thing is going to go faster. Now, you see, in that process, it's affecting Uganda while benefiting Kenya. We are forgetting that Uganda still needs to grow. Uganda still has so many things that it has to grow into. We have seen like the term limits, we've seen the cost of production is high. Look at the fuel prices today. We have so many things we need to first deal with before we start moving on to other people. But I also think that the statement by the president, His Excellency William Ruto, what he said about the milk, like you said, we can take it in both ways. I want to take it in both ways. First and foremost, the fact that we can export our milk is not a bad idea because they are paying us. But how he brought it out, I said, the cheaper milk from Uganda, you understand? It sends a message that Ugandans do not want to advance in their production sector. So they would rather export the raw materials and we do the rest. Because who is to say Kenya will not also process our milk and get better what? Get better milk or get butter, the powder milk. So what I think is we need to first and foremost work, like you said, on our domestic issues. Let's deal with our production. Let's see what is affecting the industries in Uganda. Why are people not being entrepreneurial? Why are youth seated at home? Why are youth not getting jobs? Let's first address the issues affecting our youth, because you see, dealing with a small number of people helps more than dealing with a whole large number of people, because we know that youth in East Africa are so many. Now you want to bring problems of youth from Kenya, problems of youth from Uganda, problems of youth from DRC, bring them all together and they're all fighting for one thing. If you look at East Africa, East African community, Kenya and Tanzania sort of have an upper hand. Yes, and of course they are going to prioritize their own youth before they prioritize Ugandan youth, before they prioritize DRC youth, before they prioritize Rwanda youth. So why don't we as a community, since we already have a community, yes, advise each other, first see what can we do in our homes to create a balance, like you said. And when you create the balance, then you can open the borders so that even when we are competing on a balanced line. We are competing on a balanced ground. But if you're going to compete with someone where the illiteracy levels are higher, where you find, let's say, DRC has higher illiteracy levels than Kenya, those people, the youth in DRC are not going to be able to compete with the youth in Kenya on the same line. Understand? So I think at the end of the day, like he said, I agree with him a lot on the part where we have to first and foremost deal with the issues at home, and then we can go ahead and open our borders, and then the political can always come in last, because we already have a community. The community can deal with most of the issues he's talking about. Let's discuss. If we are going to be together in trade, then why should His Excellency Museveni be in power for forever? Why should a particular president live in 2 years? You understand what I mean? Yes, we can do that without necessarily creating a political federation.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Diana. Edgar, let me just come to you. The famous saying goes, what is good for the goose is good for the gander, right? Now, Uganda's maize, Uganda's commodities have on several occasions been dismissed by member states because of poor quality. So do you think that economic federation means compromising the quality assurance? Do you think that member states are right to say that, well, we are in the same federation, we're in the same economic bloc, but your quality of maize is not, doesn't meet the quality assurance that we think it should meet? So, because why I ask this is that some have argued that our integration economically has been frustrated by some of these quality assurance standards, that perhaps they are too high, and therefore we are failing to move our communities within the region. What do you make of that? Or Uganda should step up, add value addition, and stop, crying and saying that they're being unfairly, treated?
First of all, to be fair, that question, it's not just a purely economic question. It can also be political. I think the one solution is, the best solution here is, we should have, just like how you have the UNBS, we should have a regional body responsible for standards that can authoritatively qualify standards both in Kenya, Uganda, etc. Because even though the product of, let's say there is some issue of political ego, maybe this president doesn't like this president, he can just stop your products from coming in and fake a reason that they don't match the quality. Because for you, because there's no any regional authority on quality, Even when you have the best quality, I can dismiss by saying you have the worst quality. And that's why I'm closing the borders. But when actually the issue of quality is not the reason.
Okay.
So the only way you can solve that and solve the other political biases is to have a regional authority on quality. It's like how you have a UNABS, so that it's no longer Kenya saying this is our best standard, only to reach Uganda, and then we say no, it's the worst.
Yeah.
I think that would solve that. Secondly, on the issue of, I think this former debate on the issue of first doing domestically, so that you can grow and develop your systems. I think it's a good one. But I don't think it's entirely that true from that angle. I think it's also okay I believe the spirit of integration should be really a spirit of brotherhood that involves the understanding that with greater resources and greater stability comes greater responsibility. So that you all must contribute the same. Because, for instance, as we mentioned, if we all decided to say, let's first develop as Uganda, for us to think of integration, let Congo first develop, it may never happen. There has to come a time when you have to understand and say, whereas for us we are stable in terms of security, it is okay for us to go and ensure there's some peace in this neighboring country. Not for it first say, let them first develop. Or to know that even if this economy of ours is this big, we should also allow for growth in the economy. Yeah, so I think it's more of a question of why you must accept to lose or some responsibility to help a neighbor. It's not just much of there must be something I gain, there must be something I lose. If that becomes the spirit, then you can never achieve integration.
So it must be hinged on Ubuntu.
Exactly.
Yeah, I am because
you
you
are.
are. Felix, I'll bring you in. I want us to first explore more of Diana's mind. Diana, we are discussing political federation here. Well, economic, but also it has been hinged to political federation. Let's explore the legal regime a little bit. When we envisage political federation, does it mean that we envisage a state where Uganda will have to abandon its constitution and adopt an East African constitution? How would the legal framework look like? Because how do you harmonize the laws? For example, the laws on term limits, the laws on age limits, and so many other laws. Of course, there are basic standards like human rights laws. Those are, they are accepted internationally. But there are certain laws that are independent on sovereign states to decide. So as we discuss political and economic integration, is it possible for us to collapse our domestic laws and adopt an East African constitution at some point, T?
At some point, in a perfect setting, that would work. But if you look at our setting right now, where we have Rwanda, East Africa, and rather Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, and the rest, and you see how people hold dear onto their laws, yes, you can see that alone is going to create a big problem. And I think that is one of the biggest blocks for the political federation, because people have their different laws, they believe in their laws, and what informs their law is usually their cultures and the things they come from. Whereas they say the law is not necessarily about our cultures.
Oh, okay.
Things like culture and religion, if we are being honest, do inform our law. I mean, for God and my country. Our law, even when you go to court, you first swear in belonging to whatever church you belong to. So, assuming that the whole of East Africa believes in the same culture, because that's the only way you're going to get very uniform laws and get everyone to abide to the same law. What I think, though,
which is impossible.
Yes, it's very impossible. What I think is, instead of doing that, in the political federation, we should keep our laws, yes, and then look at the laws that are contentious, work them out, yes. If we have a law in Uganda that is about term limits, and a law in Rwanda that says, you know what, these people should have term limits, this one in Uganda is saying no term limits, yes, let's look at these laws, put them side by side, see how beneficial are these laws. Let's question the laws that are contentious, you understand? And when we question these laws, then we'll be able to bring balance to the laws, because the people in Uganda are going to tell you the reasons for their need for no term limits, which are a little off the line. And the people in Rwanda are going to tell you we need these term limits because of this and this. We do not want a president for forever because we need new people coming into power. We need different ideals. We need different ideas. So when you put together these laws that are contentious of each, and you bring them together and you find middle ground where you can say, you know what, this wins over the other law. Let's do this.
You see, Diana, why I ask is because perhaps your international law knowledge will tell you that international laws are weaker compared to domestic
Domestic
laws.
yes.
So if you have international law being at the mercy of domestic laws, then how are we going to achieve political federation? Because why I ask is that for as long as we have an international law that exists at the same time with a domestic law, then the domestic law will take precedent
Yes, that's
over
why
the international law. So we shall then find ourselves at the mercies and whims of the sovereign states' laws, and the East African, if I'm to use your own words, the harmonized or streamlined laws will only be on paper, but they will be hard to enforce.
I believe that everyone should keep their laws. What I do not believe in is keeping contentious laws. There's a big difference there.
Okay.
Keeping laws that are against the laws in a different country. Because at the end of the day, we are going to need something uniform for all of us.
Yeah.
If we're going to have a political federation at the end of the day, then we need something uniform for all of us. If we are all keeping our domestic laws, let's look through what is a problem in our domestic laws. What law in Uganda contends with a law in DRC? What law in Uganda contends with a law in Rwanda? Why does it contend? Address these issues, because laws change all the time. Laws are amended. Yes? And the mere fact that we are able to amend them, I believe that each country should keep its domestic laws. However, they should look at those contentious laws, create a uniform for all of them, and then at the end of the day, when we want the political federation, we'll be able to unify without having to go through who will be the leader, who will be this, all those things. Yes.
All right.
Moderator,
I have to bring in
moderator, I think
Felix.
before she finishes, I have some information that she may respond to. I'm not a legal scholar, but whenever we have a superior law, the other laws should conform to it. That means when we have an East African community constitution, the constitution of Uganda should conform to it. In one way or the other, it means if there are any contentious issues in Uganda, those have to be automatically removed out of the constitution because it is not conforming.
They contravene.
It contravenes the spirit. I don't know what she says.
No, what I'm
About
trying
that.
to say is exactly what I was saying. First and foremost, deal with the laws that we have in the now. Look at them alongside the laws in Kenya. Look at them alongside the laws in DRC. Look at them alongside the laws in Rwanda. First, create a balance before you think about political federation, before you think about going to the creating a new constitution. Look at the laws we have now. Look at those contentious issues so that you do not have to deal with them when you reach the point of
I think what Diana is emphasizing is let's harmonize our domestic laws. Edgar, just have to bring in Felix has been quiet. Felix, this year, if Mwalimu Julius Nyerere was alive, he would be 100 years. So he would be a century old. And he was a very strong pillar of the East African Federation. And at a point, he made a very fundamental statement and said that for sustainable development to happen, it must be people-centered. The people must own the development. We are discussing the East African economic integration. In your own words and opinion, do you think that the ordinary, the wananchi, the hustlers in Kibera, the hustlers in Namuongo, the hustlers in Goma in DRC appreciate that there is need for us to federate? One of you mentioned earlier on that there is need for strategic security, that at times we integrate because there's need for strategic security. So do you think that the ordinary person in East Africa actually appreciates the need for integration?
Yeah, Mr. Moderator, thank you. I'm privileged that we have a youthful panel and most of our followers are also youthful. We always say, Iyasu Mbele. Then we have what we always say, ESC power, ESC oye. It's more of...
I want to charge you for that.
To provide
for that advert.
But you brought an important question. The spirit behind East African community, to me, in simple terms, was about how do people interact. Can Chidega from Uganda move and interact with Onyango in Kenya?
Interact to achieve what?
Just interact to achieve regional development and to achieve economic empowerment. I want to bring us to the statement. We need to know these visions because they inform our direction. Currently in ESC, we are looking at Vision 2050. And if you look at the motto or the theme behind that vision, it is achieving one people, one destiny. That means the way we think, if we are going to think that we need one currency in order to transact, and that can give us a bigger bargaining power when we are intercontinental, when we are dealing with the Asians, that's where we should go. Right now, I want to appreciate that we have adopted Kiswahili. Kiswahili is one biggest tool in this integration, because how will you communicate? How will you trade if you can't communicate? Kiswahili is a very important factor on that. Maybe the issue of this wananchi, I already hinted on how we can bring these people on board, because we need to be better organized. Currently, the youth, they are over 60% in East Africa. And what we need to do as the youth, how do we use our numerical strength or our quantitative strength to see to it that we influence or we inform things like fiscal policies? And how do we use our numerical strengths to see that we increase the factors of production? Because when you're talking of factors of production, these are things that affect the wananchi who is on the ground. What factors of production am I looking at? Can we waive off taxes on fertilizer? Can somebody plant and have assurance that these plants will grow, I will harvest, send it to a cooperative? Then the other factors of production I am looking at here. Could we give tax incentive? Could we waive this off from the youth, so that they can produce more? Those who are innovative in line of science can be more industrious. And if they are innovative, this bigger block, which is the EAC, provides market where we can sell these items, and opportunities like employment will not be a question, because we would have created that kind of space. Opportunities, other opportunities like to interact, because we have free movement of people. I can just wake up and cross the Malaba border, cross the Namanga border of Kenya and Tanzania. In that way, we can borrow best practices. Because we as the youth, we are faced by a similar challenge.
Thank you. I want to bring in, sorry to cut you short, but I want to bring in Julius on a very important aspect that you hinted on, but I think very briefly. Julius, as we clamor for regional integration, there are vultures out there who will not want to see us integrated or united. For example, when the ECOP conversation came up, people accused the European Union of seeing our integration as a threat to them. Because when we are integrated, then we can have a common market, we can support each other, we can build our economies, and we can stop borrowing from the Western world. So do you agree with the school of thought that thinks that, because, and perhaps they're right, because at the time when European Union was actually saying that, you know what, guys, first stop ECOP, a month before Germany had issued 53 licensing companies to extract and produce oil. USA has over 9,000 oil and production companies licensed to extract oil. So perhaps those who think that the Western world is afraid of our integration could be right. So do you belong to the same school of thought that our integration poses a threat to the Western world, and therefore they would frustrate it, they will cause instability in, okay, I don't accuse them, but Congo will be unstable. I mean, we shall not have it easy. What do you think?
Thank you so much, moderator. Indeed, that's the school of thought that I believe in, and it's the only valid school of thought. You see, colonialism is an ongoing process. Initially, it was direct state capture and denial of sovereignty, that these sovereign entities could not make independent decisions. They retreated politically, they held us economically. That's why you see, you walk across the Kampala street, you cannot find a bank that is owned by Ugandans. That's one pin, that their first entry point to deprive us as a citizenry
But-
of our economic
but
independence.
How is that to blame on them? Because Uganda's government sold out Uganda Commercial Bank. It was our independent decision.
You know, the structural adjustment policies
Okay.
that came in through the International Monetary Fund, simply because your leaders here in Kampala think it is important to drive a V8 300 series instead of investing in production. So they have to go to Washington to bargain for loans. And because you come at the point of need, they have the discretion in determining what the interest loan, or rather the interest on this loan, must be. Because you have your political leaders that think we must sign documents without reading them. Quite often, colleagues, I know you might depart from me, but admit that we have had our leaders come in broad day open to state that this loan is unfavorable because I did not read it at the time when I was signing the agreement. So then if we continue to be led by such leaders who lack the foresight, who lack the charisma, I don't mean that all our leaders are like that, but we have quite a number of them. That's when you find ourselves bound by loans whose terms require us to give away our economic independence, raising the capital requirement before you can start a bank. Today you need 25 billion, correct? Now, how many of us can raise 25 billion? Just a handful. But even when you can raise that, the terms of operation will make it impossible for you to run the system. And then too, the debate on ECO. He exhaustively discussed it. But let me assert, what's the notion of equity and fairness? If you have a China that belongs within the same global system, emitting its carbons unhindered, by the way, right? You have the United States of America unhindered. You have India unhindered, and UK unhindered. You have these countries that operate nuclear they are called nuclear what? The scientists. Are they nuclear technology? Let's say that, because this involves the airspace shuttles, the what. This that depends. But what do they do when you send a satellite into the space? You're going to expound on your research. And here in Uganda, they say if you start this, you will interfere with the environment. So before you question our East African pipeline that is going to make a contribution of almost 0.0 negligible, why wouldn't you go back and question your system? But especially that they are not willing to see into their system, then that's where, as citizens, we must see with courage what their intentions are to continue holding us into servitude. Because you see, if you don't have financial liberty, you're a slave.
Yeah.
You're a prisoner, my brother. You're not having liberty. So we must seek for our independence economically by responding with courage and questioning the resolutions that they make in the region.
So I think just to wrap it up, you're saying that they have not come to equity with clean hands.
Yes, their hands are tainted with.
Tainted.
Moderator, you interrupted me. I was to conclude.
No, Felix, you know Edgar hasn't said anything ever since we came from the break. Edgar, just my question to you is that if we are to achieve economic integration, the EAC member states must address one very fundamental issue, which he hinted on, the debt burden. We are here discussing Kenya and how they've built the economy, but Kenya's debt burden is way higher than ours in Uganda. Now, he also mentioned the structural adjustment programs, with which came, of course, things like private sector partnerships, things like they encouraged borrowing, but also they encouraged foreign direct investments, which opened up African economies for of course, exploitation. But how do we go about with the issue of debt, the issue of donations? Because Dambisa Moyo, who is a very interesting African scholar of economics, said that think about the well-intentioned nets, mosquito nets, that are given to African states. But they put the domestic producer of nets out of business because you're getting free nets from Europe to deal with mosquitoes. Now, how about the domestic producer who is producing those nets? Where is he going to sell those nets to? So how do you go about with the big question of our debt burden? Now, as a region, not as a country. So the debt burden question, how do you go about with it?
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, I also want to say that, where the West's interests are, even God can go to hell. So it's also important to understand, the Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank and the IMF, as you clearly mentioned, just put it in simple terms, is that they forced you to open your markets while they closed theirs. And they drop trash, actually, third world items in your countries while closing the markets. Of course, there's that structural barrier. And the solution to that, really, I don't think I'll be comfortable to mention it because it's a revolutionary one.
No, tell us.
It's a revolutionary one because the idea here is that, there's some force that you guys need to break up those systems. And you've had on many occasions, our president here will making those speeches, sometimes abusive to those people. But I think sometimes you just need to have such sort of actions that align with those abusive responses. Not just verbally, but real act on them. But secondly, normally economically, you just need to raise that production here and safeguard this market of East Africa. But thirdly, and I think it's the most important thing, we need to have the leaders who do by example. We need to start seeing a state house here where the convoy of the president is full of cars from the killer EV. Because you need to understand how this thing like how it operates. You see, if you continue buying like fuel from Shell, from Total, right, from those companies, and you have here these local investors of BAM and those oil businesses, what you do, you continue having these foreign markets here growing, and even you as leaders, you're the example there. You're buying these bad cars, those nice, beautiful cars from that side. When you do not support your own industries here, there is no way Akidega here is going to buy a killer EV when the Speaker of Parliament is spending 2.5 to buy a Mercedes. Because even you in your culture, you go with that mindset that for you to have anything beautiful, it must be foreign. And at the end of the day, we shall continue with this integration and ETC, but when we are supporting foreign material and foreign production, when all the technology and the innovation here is just not of any fruit. So I think we need to start walking the talk.
Yeah.
I just want him to help me on that very point. How then do we build trust in the local production? Because you realize they're not buying Kira EV cars not because they're ugly, but because they don't trust our own market. So how do we manage to build that trust?
As I mentioned, that trust first is from the leaders. If you work with M7 and his 30-something cars convoy was only full of killer EV cars, I'm telling you, Edgar will most likely buy the same. If the speaker, instead of buying 2.5, how many billions to go and buy those, I'm sure you'll do the same. So I think it's more of a role model question, the culture from the leaders themselves. When the leaders themselves embrace the local, markets, then I'm sure the people will follow suit.
Then you're asking questions, but also I have a question for you. And that is, what is Uganda exporting? For example, we are discussing the economic integration, but let's evaluate what Uganda has to offer. Some people who are cynic in nature have said that Uganda is exporting security. That our national army has gone ahead to stabilize in Congo, has gone ahead to stabilize in South Sudan, it's in Somalia. Our biggest export is security and stability of the region. And if I'm to take you back to why the League of Nations was formed, it was after those world wars. So the idea was, how can we have a strategic security agenda? So do you think that Uganda has led the region in terms of stability and in terms of security? Do you think we have played our part enormously? And even when we are castigated on our shortcomings of our economic contribution, we have made enormous contribution in terms of stability and security.
I think when you look at it from the mainstream viewpoint, it will show you that Uganda has done something great. I mean, every day we have this news about Uganda in a different country, Uganda doing something for them. So looking at it from the mainstream viewpoint, you see Uganda has done something great. Enormous, that is very subjective, but it has done something, yes. But I also think there are so many things that limit Uganda from doing the Great with its security that it claims to export. Look at how the issue with Rwanda, if we are saying we are exporting security, but even our closest neighbors who had to scare us and we had to move up and down and everything, and we are the people who are at the forefront of security, then it brings questions to mind. Are they just feeding us something that they want us to hear? So I think our security still has a lot more to do.
But isn't there evidence?
But
don't we have operation in DRC Congo, in Goma?
Yes, there is evidence, like I said, mainstream
Operation
evidence.
Shuja.
Yes, it's very mainstream, because at the end of the day, when you look at countries like Rwanda scaring most of us in our own country, yet we are the ones who have to be the leaders in security. That alone should make you question the quality or the authenticity of this mainstream information we keep getting. Because if we can be scared in our own country,
but do you doubt our contribution, for example, in Mogadishu?
No.
That we quelled Al-Shabaab in Mogadishu, and that we even had the Lion of Mogadishu here in Uganda, the late, Paul Lokech.
I am not disputing that there has been good done by our security. What I'm saying is, if we ourselves are still threatened that much by security, this very year there were bombs, and like these are things we should be able to see through by now, if we are the ones who are going to be at the forefront of what? Of the security. But we had one, and then the second comes in, and we are still moving. Anytime now you could see another one, and we are wondering what is happening. So the mere fact that even our security is still is still being shaken, I think we cannot very confidently call ourselves the leaders of security in the region. What we need to do is see what we can do for our security, make it better, because we do have a good security system. Our only problem is it is not the best.
All right, Edgar, I'll come to you just as we wrap this up. Felix Odu, let me come to you. And still on the issue of security, whereas Uganda boasts of exporting security to the region, perhaps what Diana might not have told us is that there is more to security. There is human security. That we might not discuss our prowess in terms of maybe military power, but human security. We still have people who have gone missing in this country. Up to date, they've never been discovered. So is security more than just the military power, or it goes back to human security? Where are Ugandans who have gone missing and we don't know where they are, and who is taking them? All those questions around human security. So perhaps are we diagnosing security from a different perspective and missing out on the bigger link of it's about me and you, it's about Ubuntu, that if you're secure, I am secure, the region is secure, the continent is secure. Doesn't security begin with human security?
Okay, thank you so much for very unfortunate for the families who you have maybe a brother, a sister has disappeared, and this is happening here in our country, which has been positioned as a security powerhouse in the region of East Africa, and this is not debatable. Actually, the Europeans have consensus with Uganda on matters of peace, security, and stability. I just want to say that issue of security is very broad, but I would like to look at it from, we had an IGP, Inspector General of Police, who almost championed this so much. That is General Kale Kaihura. I don't know where he is currently, but one time he was an IGP. He looked at community policing. How do you be a brother or a sister's keeper? That intelligence, that's where it starts from. Because for crime to happen, it means there should have been indicators. In pathology, we usually believe where crime has happened, like in security, if somebody has been picked, there is always evidence that has been left that can be traced. So I want to agree with the moderator that for issue of security, we have to start it at an individual level. Then on the other issues of people maybe who have been picked up on their political differences and that, there will never be a perfect state. We only look at how do we improve the mistakes of the past regimes. These are things that happened during Obote,
So
the
can
increase
we, can we
that
then say,
happened during
can we
Idi
then
Amin.
say, can we then say conclusively that the state has failed on its social contract with the people? Because if you cannot guarantee my security as a state, then what are you doing being a state?
The primary objective, like our security, that's to guard external conflicts and that, and external invaders. It's with the UPDF, the Uganda People's Defense Forces. They have that responsibility to protect lives and property.
Yeah.
And Ugandans don't disagree that they've done their best.
All right. So I think conclusively, just to wrap it up, we are doing well in terms of territorial protection and sovereignty, but I think internally there are still certain gaps that we have to fill. Colleagues, thank you. Our time is fast spent, so I'll just give you 1 minute to just give us your last words on the show or your parting shots. So I'll just begin with you, Felix. I will come to you, Edgar. Julius, then I'll give Diana the last words. Yes, Felix, just in 1 minute.
Interestingly, what I would say, as the youth, we should explore the opportunities that exist with us, right from the communities, the villages we are in, up to the mainstream. Then, as I conclude, I would also like to say to it, let's have the conversation of the East African community go also to the common man. Let's bring the common man into this kind of picture. And at the same time, we shouldn't run away from our values as Africans, African traditional society, where I want to say, kitu ambayo mkubwa anaona kama amepanda muti, mtoto hawezi kuona hata kama amepanda muti. What that means, what an elder is able to see while seated, a child is not able to see even when they are standing. The spirit of elders of East Africa should really be maintained. And I want to thank the East African community, where we work closely with SG, Right Honorable Peter Mathuki. And at the same time, I want to thank my constituents, Uganda National Students Association, which has given us this platform to come, and then the East African Students Union. It would be unfair to leave this show without thanking the Civic Space TV, which is definitely an internationally viewed channel. Thank you so much for the support. I remain Odu Felix, the political vibrator.
Yes, Edgar, your last words.
Thank you so much. Last words feels like you are almost dead, but thank you. I think it's important from today's discussion that people out there should embrace the spirit of East African community, and that all the processes, especially of economic transformation, they ought to be people-centered and people-driven. But also that it's very important that for individual member states to focus so much on value addition, because that's how we can transform our economy. And also to lead by the example by consuming the locally made products. And then lastly, I think it was also important at the level of security and international, relations, that it's important to always be that, our neighbor's keeper. And also I think it's also strategic for us to appreciate the efforts that are happening now, us getting to have this peace in Congo and all other neighboring states is very important and pertinent. Yeah, otherwise, thanks so much to the viewers. I think those will be my last words. And it has been a pleasure surely joining you at Civic Space TV.
Yes, Julius.
I must state that it's a particular honor on my part to be here. I understand that there is sacrifice that is made towards this arrangement, and I cannot thank you enough. Thank you.
Yes, Diana.
Thank you very much. I will end by saying that East African community integration is a very, very good idea, which we must all embrace. But while we do it, let's first and foremost seek to harmonize our domestic issues. And then, because at this point we are doing it while looking at a bigger goal, while we look at this bigger goal, let's harmonize them, and then we can always start moving towards the East African integration. Thank you.
Well, in the spirit of the East African Federation, I say to you that Asante sana. Viongozi, thank you for sparing the time. Ndugu Felix, Comrade Diana, Ndugu Edgar, and Ndugu Julius, many thanks for sparing the time. Well, this brings us to the end of this episode of the Youth Roundtable. Until next week, same time, same place. Asanteni sana. Have a lovely week. But also, let me just mention something in Kiswahili here that goes, asante watazamaji wa ndugu. Thank you very much. See you next week, same time.